Science and blindness. What didactics? When we talk about science and blindness, especially mathematics and blindness, we are often confronted with one of the many clichés regarding the blind. The one according to which, lacking sight, blind people have greater difficulty in understanding scientific disciplines, especially logical, mathematical, and geometric concepts. And to be consistent with this assumption, many teachers and educators often ask themselves what teaching methods should be put in place for visually impaired students to study mathematics, or even what mathematics can be taught to a blind pupil. The answer given by José del Campo in his book Teaching Mathematics to the Blind is unequivocal. Mathematics is not taught but learned. And learning it for any child means discovering it for yourself. Learning mathematics is in fact for any child, even the blind child, the fruit of countless concrete experiences of discovering and manipulating reality. It is not the lack of sight that makes it difficult for a blind person to learn mathematics, but rather the lack of tactile experiences of manipulating concrete objects. Hence the lack of direct knowledge of reality. What actually gives rise to the concept of number? We know that number is a logical concept resulting from the acquisition of numerous skills and competencies, which allow the child, any child, to mature the structures of thought pertaining to logical and mathematical development. What are these pre-mathematical skills? First of all, knowledge of the body scheme, the ability to observe, to touch, to recognize. The ability to understand spatial relationships and lateralization. The ability to select, classify serially. The ability to perform spatial, temporal, and logical operations. The ability to recognize quantity and quantity invariance. And from all this the concept of number is born. And so the didactics that we must envisage in the study of scientific disciplines with blind and visually impaired pupils must be an active, experimental didactics, centered on doing, on acting, on the active involvement of each pupil, respecting his or her learning development times, and envisaging the use of materials, aids and didactic strategies that respect the mode of knowledge of the blind pupil. Which materials? Which aids? From occasional materials, common structured materials, didactic aids. This are many materials that we can use without, however, ever forgetting what Maria Montessori used to say, namely that any material, any aid, is a marvelous and excellent means in the hands of those who are able to use it, but for itself it passes unnoticed. I.e., any material, even the most constructo RY, is not exhaustive in itself. It is not only the materials and aids that enable the child to learn to count, but rather it is the educational method focused on experience, on concrete experience, on direct action, on discovery. As occasional materials, the concrete objects of reality are the first tools with which the child must interact. These must be appropriately chosen by the teacher with respect to the blind child's ways of knowing his approach to reality. Therefore, the teacher must know the characteristics of tactile perception, because obviously the main tool of knowledge for those who cannot see is touch. Therefore, the teacher, in consideration of all this, must choose objects whose characteristics are clear and perceptible to the touch, objects initially small enough to be closed in the hands, objects that the child knows and can be used in the hands, objects that the child knows and can learn to touch, objects initially small enough to be closed in the hands, objects that the child is familiar with in terms of weight, shape, tactility. We can use fruit candies, dried fruit, but also buttons, sheets and stones, corks, and so on. Initially, it is important to use just a few elements arranged in containers and placed in a circumscribed operating space that can be easily controlled by the child, and the manipulation of different materials that any child learns to discriminate, select, match, classify, classify, and finally count. This first concrete operating phase must therefore focus on manipulation and exploration, and then gradually move on to using typhloididactic aids. There are many typhloididactic aids structured for the logical, mathematical, scientific area. The main Italian production centers are the National Federation of Institutions for the Blind and the Institute for the Blind in Milan, and on their websites, it is possible to view all their materials.